The night was a blur of fire and ice. The fever gripped my throat like the hands of a ghost, and for a few hours, I truly believed I was crossing over to join Kwame in the Silent Lands. I could hear the muffled bass of the music through the walls, the sound of my son's success thumping against my coffin. Pause. Sound of a distant, shattering glass. Around midnight, the music stopped. The laughter died down. I heard the expensive cars roaring away, one by one, carrying the ministers and the millionaires back to their ivory towers. I waited. I waited for the click of the lock. I waited for Babatunde to come and say, "Mama, I am sorry." It was the stress. "Let me take you to a bed with silk sheets." Bitter chuckle. The lock never clicked. The footsteps never came. My own son left me in the dark, shivering in my own sweat, while he went to sleep in a room with a gold-plated door. That was the moment the mother in me died. The woman who would have jumped into a fire to save him, she burned away in that fever. Tone shifts, sharp, clear, and determined. As the first gray light of dawn crept through the cracks in the servant quarters walls, I didn't feel weak anymore. I felt light. I found a piece of rusted metal on the floor and worked at the hinge of the door for hours. My fingers bled, again, but this time, the blood didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like fuel. By sunrise, the door gave way. I stumbled out into the courtyard of the mansion. The garden was littered with expensive champagne bottles and half-eaten delicacies. Thousands of dollars wasted in a single night, while I sat in the dark without a drop of water. I walked into the main house. The servants, men and women I had trained, looked at me with pity. I ignored them. I walked straight to Babatunde's master bedroom. He was fast asleep, his face peaceful, looking exactly like the little boy I used to tuck into bed. Tone, low and dangerous. I stood over him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the one thing I had kept from the village, my silver tailor's shears. The blades were sharp enough to cut through the thickest leather. He opened his eyes and jumped, seeing me standing there like a vengeful spirit, drenched in rain and covered in the dust of the servant quarter. "Mama," he gasped, clutching his silk duvet. "What are you doing? You look insane. Go back to the quarters, the cleaners haven't finished yet." I looked him dead in the eye and held up the shears. I didn't point them at his throat. I pointed them at the custom-made, Italian silk suit hanging on his valet stand, the suit he wore to impress the minister. Sound of fabric ripping, loud and harsh. With one swift motion, I shredded the sleeve. "You told them your mother was dead, Babatunde," I said, my voice as steady as a mountain. "You told them you were born from gold and status. But you forgot something. I am the one who measured your height. I am the one who knows where every seam of your life is hidden." He stood up, his face turning from fear to a cold, ugly rage. "You've lost your mind. I gave you everything. This house, this food. And you ruined my property?" "You gave me a cage," I replied. "And now, I am going to show you what happens when a tailor decides to unmake a man." Tone, darkly triumphant. I turned to leave, but I stopped at the door. "Oh, and Babatunde? That business deal you signed last night with Minister Jabari? You should check your briefcase. While you were toast into your future, I saw the minister's assistant slipping a file out of your study. You were so busy hiding your mother, you forgot to watch your back." The color drained from his face. He scrambled for his phone. He didn't know yet that the tailor had already started pulling the thread that would unravel his entire empire. "My name is Zuriya. In my language, it means good fortune. But as I lie here on the cold, damp floor of the servants' quarter, staring at the mold growing on the ceiling, I realize that names are often the cruelest lies we tell ourselves. Pause for 2 seconds. For 30 years, the heartbeat of my home was the rhythmic clack-clack-clack of a rusted, manual sewing machine. When my husband, Kwame, was taken by the earth, he left me with nothing but a 2-year-old boy named Babatunde and a mountain of debt. I had no land. I had no gold. I only had a needle, a thread, and a spine made of iron. Sound effect, low hum of a sewing machine fades in. Every single stitch I ever made was a prayer for my son. I lost my eyesight under the dim flicker of kerosene lamps so that he could read the brightest books. My fingers, look at them. They are scarred, calloused, and stained with the dyes of 1,000 cheap fabrics. I skipped meals for weeks, telling Babatunde that the scent of the steam from the pot was enough to fill my stomach, just so he could walk to school in polished shoes. I was a tailor. A simple, village tailor. But in my mind, I was weaving a golden future for my king. Tone shifts, bittersweet, slightly nostalgic. I remember him sitting at my feet while I worked. He used to touch my rough hands and say, "Mama, when I become a big businessman, you will never touch a needle again. I will wrap you in the finest silks of the city." I believed him. I stitched that promise into my heart. Tone shifts, cold, sharp, and trembling with hurt. Years passed. The boy became a giant. Babatunde, the name now echoes in the marble hallways of the capital. He became a titan of industry. He built a mansion so large it has rooms he has never even walked into. He brought me here from the village 2 years ago. I thought it was my reward. I thought I was finally home. But I quickly learned that I wasn't brought here to be a mother. I was brought here to be hidden. To the world, Babatunde is a self-made man of noble origin. To his friends, I am not the mother who bled for his education. I am the old woman from the village who looks after the kitchen. He told his partners, like the wealthy minister Jabari, that his mother passed away years ago. He was ashamed. Ashamed that the blood in his veins was paid for by the sweat of a common tailor. Sound effect, loud, muffled party music and laughter in the background. Tonight is the breaking point. Tonight, the house is glowing with crystal chandeliers. The air smells of expensive perfumes and roasted meats. Babatunde is hosting the city's elite to celebrate his biggest business deal. An hour before the guests arrived, he came to my room. He looked at my traditional wrapper and my scarred hands with a look of pure disgust. "Mama," he said, his voice as cold as a grave. "Tonight is too important. I cannot have you wandering around. My guests are people of high status. If they see you, they will ask questions. They will see the village in you. They will smell the tailor on you." Before I could speak, he grabbed my arm, the same arm that carried him when he was too weak to walk, and he dragged me. He dragged me to the back of the estate, to this dark, freezing servant quarter meant for broken furniture. Dramatic sound, a heavy iron door slams and a lock turns. "Stay here, Mama," he hissed through the door. "Don't ruin this for me." Voice becomes shaky, interrupted by a painful cough. The floor is freezing. The rain is leaking through the roof, soaking my thin clothes. A fever is burning through my bones like a wildfire. I can feel my lungs tightening. I pounded on the door with the last of my strength. "Babatunde! My son! I cannot breathe. Please, the fever. I need a doctor." I heard his footsteps stop outside. For a second, the music faded. I hoped, that the little boy who loved me was still in there. But his voice came through the wood, dry and heartless. Mama, keep your voice down. The minister is giving a speech. You are being dramatic. Just sleep it off. I'll check on you in the morning. Long pause. He walked away. He chose a business deal over my life. As I lie here in the dark, coughing up blood, I realize the truth. I spent 30 years stitching a suit for a monster. But listen to me, Babatunde, if my ancestors give me the strength to survive this night, I will show you that the same hands that sewed your success can also rip it apart at the seams. The party isn't over yet, my son. Not yet. Babatunde ko laga the kumui ekan here camera main band karka as mara mun band kar dia hai. Magar wa bul gaya kuek darzan ki nazar kitni tez hodi hai. Main barsan tak kapdon kutank dek hain, mui mulam hai ku kahan esiek dagaga kencho to pura libas akad jata hai. Jab main uski camera esi bahar nikli, to Babatunde apni dostun or partners ko phone malain ki koshish kar rahada. Wa baklaya hua the. Uska wa guruwer, uski wa akad, a pisin main badal rahiti. Main uski taraf mud kar bi nahi deka. Main apni purani chadar uthai or sita shihar kuas purain hiski taraf nikul gai jahan mir purain miln whale rate they. Shihar ko log Babatunde ko ek kamyab masihas samajed they. Magar mui patha the ku uski kamayabi ki bunyad kitni kakchi hai. Rast main mui minister Jabari Kalwahi assistant Mila Jisa main rat ko kori kardi deka the. Main use roka. Wa mui pachin gaya. Usan sosha main uski shikayat karenji, magar main usi surf ak sol kia. Beta, jo file tum chirei hai, uzmi kia hai? Wadar gaya, magar jab main use bataya ko Babatunde eni mir sof kia kia, to uski ankon main hamdardi aa gai. Usan bataya kuas file main Babatunde kuaser kagazat hain jo dikate hain kuasan sarkaris main parnazayas kabsa kia hai. Babatunde eni sosha the kuwa apni makeo chupakar apni image sofra kega, magar wiyi bul gaya kugana kabi chupte nahi. Mainus assistant se wa file nahi mangi. Main usi kaha, yi file apni pas rako. Bas muyas jaga luchelo jahan aaj shim keo Babatunde ki nei factory kaiftada, inauguration, hona hai. Sham hui. Factory ku bahar mela laga the. Bade nita, Akbar whale or Shihar ku emir log wahan maujud they. Babatunde stage par kata maskura raha the. Wa ace bashan de raha the jays wa koi farishta ho. Usan stage se kaha, Mary kamayabi karas Mary menet or Mary unchi sak hai. Theek usi whacked, main bead ko chirut hu age body. Main wahi purana, fata hua capta pena the jo main servant quarter main pene hu ti. Mary ankon main a buker ki jalan nahi, baki ekog ti. Jab logo any ek buddy orit ko stage ki tarafate deka, to sab kamash hoge. Babatunde ka chera safed pad gaya. Usan security ko ishara kia kamui bahar nikul dine. Magar main zor se kaha, kyan Babatunde? Kal rattatun mui tala lagaya the aaj sab kasamni mui dakadoj? Logon main gupshup shuru ho gai. Camera Mary taraf mud gay. Minister Jabari eni hirat se pucha, Babatunde, yi orit kaun hai? Tum to kaha the tumhari ma mar chuki hai? Babatunde haklain laga. Yi ek pagal orit hai. Yi hammer purain jain ki hai, dimigi tawazan theek nahi hai iska. Main stage par kata hokar apna hath yuberthea. Wahi hath jis par silai ki swayon kasaktan nishan they. Main wahan maujud sab logo se kaha, yi hath deko. In hathan net saltak silai ki taki laka aaj is stage par kata hosake. Main pagal nahi hun. Main iski was sakai hun jisa yi aaj zinda dafin karna chata the. Main wahi file nikul kar minister kahath main di jo mui assistant nedt. Main kaha, jo beta apni ma ka nahi hosaka, wish shihar ka kia haga? Por Pandal main Sonata Chow Gaya. Babatunda ki angkon main pali bar wa kauf deka jo manus ratas anhir camera main Mrs. Kia the. Ub kahani palat chuki tea. Ub wakaidi the, or main azad. The silence that followed my words was heavier than any stone. On that stage, under the blinding white lights of the cameras, I watched my son's empire crumble in a matter of seconds. Minister Jabari opened the file, his eyes scanning the documents that proved Babatunda had built his factory on stolen land, using bribes that were never meant to be found. Babatunda tried to speak. He reached out to grab the microphone, his hands trembling, but the crowd, the same crowd that had cheered for him minutes ago, now hissed with disgust. The journalists were no longer looking for a success story, they were hungry for a scandal. Flashbulbs went off like lightning strikes, capturing the sweat pouring down his pale face. "Security!" Babatunda screamed, his voice cracking. "Get this woman out of here. She's a liar. She's nothing." But the security guards didn't move. They were men from the streets, men who had mothers just like me. They looked at my scarred, tailor's hands, then at his expensive silk suit, and they stood still. One of them even looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Minister Jabari closed the file and looked at Babatunda with a coldness that made the air freeze. "You told me you were a man of honor," the minister said. "You told me you came from a lineage of scholars. But you are just a man who is ashamed of the very hands that fed him. If you can betray your own mother, you will betray the city without a second thought." The minister turned his back and walked off the stage. Within minutes, the guests followed. The chairs were knocked over, the expensive decorations were trampled, and the lion of industry was left standing alone on a hollow wooden platform. By the next morning, the world had changed. The news of the tailor mother was on every radio station and every newspaper. The banks froze Babatunda's accounts. His partners cancelled their contracts. The man who was too ashamed to be seen with a tailor was now the most hated name in the country. I didn't go back to the mansion. I went back to the old, dusty part of town and rented a small room. I sat by the window, listening to the rain. I didn't feel happy. A mother never truly enjoys seeing her child fall, even if he pushed her into the dirt. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. The weight of the secret was gone. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't the confident, rhythmic knock of a businessman. It was the heavy, dragging sound of a man who had lost everything. I opened the door. There stood Babatunda. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained. His hair was messy, and his eyes were bloodshot from crying. He looked just like he did 30 years ago when he had failed an exam and came to me for comfort. He fell to his knees in the mud outside my door. He grabbed the hem of my old wrapper and sobbed. "Mama, they took everything. The house, the cars, the business, it's all gone. I have nowhere to go. Please, Mama. I'm your son. Don't leave me in the street." I looked down at his head, at the boy I had sacrificed my life for. The anger was there, but so was the memory of the baby I used to hold. I stayed silent for a long time, the only sound being his desperate weeping. I pulled my wrapper out of his grip. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. "You didn't lose everything because of me, Babatunda. You lost everything because you forgot how to be a human being. You locked me in a dark room because you were ashamed of these hands. Now, those same hands are all that's left to help you." I stepped back and started to close the door. "You want to be my son again? Then go find the man you were before you became a businessman. Until then, you are just a stranger who once lived in my heart." For weeks after the scandal, the city could talk of nothing else. They called me the Steel Tailor. To the world, I was a hero. To the women in the market, I was a symbol of every mother who had been forgotten by a child they raised on their backs. But in the quiet hours of the night, when the wind whistled through the cracks of my small room, I was just a woman whose heart had been ripped out by the person she loved most. But Babatunde did not leave my doorstep that first night. He stayed in the dirt, huddled against the wall like a stray dog. The neighbors looked at him with scorn. This was the man who had owned a fleet of cars, now reduced to begging for a mother's mercy. He thought that by crying, he could stitch the relationship back together. But some fabrics are so badly torn that no thread in the world can mend them. Eventually, the bank took his mansion. They took his furniture, his clothes, and his pride. He came to me one last time, his voice a broken whisper. "Mama, I have nothing left. I am hungry. I have no place to sleep." I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the toddler who used to cry when he fell. My heart wavered. But then, I remembered the smell of the damp servant quarter. I remembered the sound of the lock turning while I gasped for air. I handed him a small, heavy bag. He opened it, expecting money or gold. Instead, his eyes widened as he saw what was inside. It was my old, rusted manual sewing machine. The same machine that had paid for his life. "This is your inheritance, Babatunde," I told him. "You wanted to be a big man? You wanted to build empires? Now, you will learn how it is done. One stitch at a time. If you want to eat, you will sew. If you want a roof, you will mend the clothes of the people you once looked down upon." He looked at the machine with horror. To him, it was a symbol of shame. To me, it was the only honest thing he had ever touched. He took it and disappeared into the shadows of the city. I began to use my fame for something better. I didn't want the cameras or the interviews. I opened a small school, not for business, but for tailoring. I called it the Mother's Thread. I taught young women how to be independent, how to value their craft, and most importantly, how to never let anyone, not even their own flesh and blood, make them feel small. One afternoon, months later, I was walking through the poorest part of the market to buy fabric. In a corner, under a tattered plastic sheet, I heard a familiar sound. Clack, clack, clack. Clack, clack, clack. I stopped. There, sitting on a wooden crate, was Babatunde. His hands, once soft and manicured, were covered in needle pricks. He was hunched over a pair of old trousers, his eyes focused on the needle. He didn't see me. He was too busy working. He wasn't the lion of industry anymore. He was just a man trying to earn his bread. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, cold peace. He was finally learning the lesson I had tried to teach him his whole life, that a man's worth is not in the suit he wears, but in the work he does to earn it. But just as I turned to walk away, a black car pulled up to the curb. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They weren't from the bank, and they weren't his old friends. They were the men Babatunde had cheated to build his empire, men who didn't care about mothers or sewing machines. They only cared about the money he still owed them. I watched from the shadows as they approached his small stall. My breath caught in my throat. The thread was pulling tight again, and this time, it was wrapped around his neck. The black car sat idling, its engine a low growl in the crowded market. I stayed hidden behind a stack of crates, my heart hammering against my ribs. I saw the two men approach Babatunde. They didn't speak. One of them kicked my old sewing machine, sending it crashing into the dirt. The sound of that metal hitting the ground felt like a bullet in my own chest. Babatunde looked up, terror draining the color from his face. These were the men he had stepped on to reach the top. He had taken their investments and vanished when the scandal broke. Now, there was no mansion to hide in, no security guards to protect him. "Where is the money, Babatunde?" the tall one asked, his voice a deadly calm. I have nothing," my son stammered, his hands shaking as he pointed to the broken machine. "I am just a tailor now. Please, give me time." The man laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Time is a luxury for people with mothers in the servant quarters. For you, time has run out." He reached into his jacket, and I saw the glint of steel. In that split second, the world slowed down. I saw my son, not the businessman, not the betrayer, but the boy who used to fear the dark. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. I stepped out of the shadows and stood between my son and the blade. "Stop!" I screamed. My voice was no longer that of a frail old woman. It was the roar of a lioness. The men froze. Everyone in the market turned to look. They recognized me. I was the woman from the news. I was the mother he had shamed. "You want blood?" I asked, stepping closer to the man with the knife. "You won't get it from him. He has nothing left but his soul, and that belongs to me. If you touch him, the whole city will rise. The cameras are everywhere. Do you want to be the men who killed the steel tailor's son?" The man hesitated. He looked at the crowd, at the dozens of phones already recording the scene. He looked at my eyes, eyes that had seen enough pain to fill an ocean. He cursed under his breath, spat on the ground, and signaled his partner. They got back into the car and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The market went silent. Babatunde was trembling on the ground, his face buried in his hands. I looked down at the broken sewing machine, the iron frame was cracked, the needle snapped in two. It was finally over. The machine that had built his life was now truly dead. I reached out my hand. For a long time, Babatunde just stared at it. It was the same hand he had pushed away in the mansion. The same hand he had locked behind a door. Slowly, he reached out and took it. His skin was rough now, just like mine. "Come," I said quietly. I didn't take him back to a palace. I took him to my small school. I gave him a broom and a cloth. "You will work here," I told him. "You will sweep the floors while I teach these women how to be stronger than you ever were. You will see their faces every day. You will learn that the people you called servants are the ones who carry the world on their shoulders." He didn't argue. He didn't ask for silk. He just started to sweep. As I sat down at my own machine that evening, I realized that the story of Zuriya and Babatunde was not a story of revenge. It was a story of a long, painful repair. I had spent 30 years sewing a suit for a man who didn't deserve it. But now, I was teaching him how to sew his own character, one humble day at a time. I looked out the window at the setting sun. My eyes are dim, and my back is bent, but my spirit is finally straight. The thread of my life had been tangled, knotted, and almost broken. But in the end, I was the one who held the shears. I was the one who decided how the story would finish. And as the rhythm of the machines filled the room, I finally let out a breath I had been holding for 30 years. I am Zuriya. I am a tailor. And I am finally, truly, home. This concludes the story. It leaves the audience with a powerful message about redemption, labor, and the unbreakable bond of a mother.